Hey everyone. Thanks for joining us either live or on the replay. I am excited because today I am talking with a few other of my stage one students, and they're going to share some their insights. So you're not just going to hear from me today, thankfully. Just get different perspectives on how the program has gone so far for them, what they have thought, what's been most challenging, any advice they may have. And again, we're all stage one. So we are just beginning our MW journey and we have a ways to go. But our exam is in about a week and a half. So it's July 25th. And let me just give you a little overview before Robert joins me. He's my first guest here. So we have two parts, and we've got our tasting part in the morning, 12 blind wines, and we answer a bunch of questions on them, and we have to do that in 2 hours and 15 minutes. And that sounds like a long time, but it's actually not. It is, Robert, I see you. There we go. It flies by because you've got to taste and analyze and figure out what you think the wine is and then write about it or type it. Good morning.
Morning.
Thanks for joining. I'm just going over really quickly the exam. So, okay, 2 hours and 15 minutes, blind wines. Sounds like a long time, but it's not, as you know. And then what do we have? Like an hour and a half, hour and
An
a half
hour
minutes?
for each
Okay.
essay.
For lunch or to go have a good cry.
Oh, yeah. Something like that, yeah. An hour, I think an hour and 45, and then we have an hour for each essay, yeah.
Yeah, it's going to, I don't know what I'm going to do during that time. We'll discuss. But then we've got to come back and write 2 essays. And we have one mandatory or compulsory essay that we all have to write about. And then we get to choose from 2. So, Robert, thank you.
And they're from past papers, and so that
they are from past papers.
So it's not as, yeah.
But, like, they could go back a decade easily. So, please tell, because I mean, I know you and a lot of people know you, but some of our Elevage wine coaching people may not. So introduce yourself. Where are you from and kind of what do you do?
Sure. So Robert Vernick, I am based in San Francisco. I am not in wine full time, although I spend a lot of time on wine. So I will say that I am in the tech industry. I do have a podcast that we started during the pandemic with my co-host Peter Young, who is stage 2. He passed the theory part of stage 2. He's got to do the practical. And so he wrote a book on luxury wine marketing, and I have my wine account here, Wine Terroir, which I've done a bunch of. It's a fairly healthy wine Instagram account, and so. During the pandemic, we decided to start this podcast where we could talk about social media and also about luxury wine marketing, and it just became this business podcast. And we just started interviewing people, and it's I think it's a pretty good podcast. And so we have a lot of wine trades, we have a lot of trade, and so I get to interview lots of people. And during the pandemic, I interviewed lots of producers for the consumer side. So I'm kind of more on the media side. Than the traditional industry, either selling wine. So I don't make my income from selling wine or making wine in that matter. So that's kind of my background.
Yeah. Well, thank you. And so about your podcast, because I think for a lot of students going from diploma to the MW program, one of the biggest changes is that we don't need to just write about what Hale is and what it does and management options. We need to talk about what specific producers are doing. And I feel like you have a huge leg up on that because you have interviewed so many different producers.
Yeah, it's whether or not I can recall any of that information.
Well, and I hate to put you on the spot. Is there any episodes that stand out that you're like, that would be a very helpful one for a stage 1 student to listen to?
Sure. I think so. I think the ones that are probably harder for people that are coming out of diploma is like, we just recently re-released our Amarin Cork episode, and then we interviewed the U.S. managing director for Diam. So it's interesting to hear about closures, because that's a thing that, it's a very, unless you're a winemaker involved in bottling, that is something that is going to be a little bit more difficult for people to kind of wrap their head around about like what is the decision, because it's not just about cork taint, it's actually so much more complicated than that.
Yeah.
And so talking about that and like what is changing in the cork industry, because basically they've been forced to level up their game because of things like diamond and things like that. And so those two episodes side by side. There's a really great one on smoke taint as well, which is a little bit more nerdy, less typical. But in terms of another one I think was interesting was the Jean-Baptiste Lacaillon, the chef de cave from Cristal. We did 2 episodes with him about the move to organic viticulture and like why is that good for champagne and things like that. So those are all great episodes, but it depends on what you're looking for. And honestly, I think the most important thing is like, what is your knowledge base and what are your gaps, and find the information that is your gaps.
And for focusing on those, because I will tell you, that is not usually what us students want to focus on. We want to focus on what we know, what we're strong with. So what is your gap, Robert? What is your
viticulture for sure.
Okay, is it?
Yeah, I mean, I have a decent knowledge, but if you're going to dive really deep into, depending on what questions I ask, there's an issue there. There's a lot of book knowledge that is helpful, but then having examples of hey, this producer in this location does it this way, and why is that good or bad is like. So I think that's the big thing from the diploma. It's like, hey, I have a lot of book knowledge that's great from the diploma, and I think diploma is fabulous. And it's like, whether it's on theory or practical, like getting away from a tasting note and talking about like evidence-based, like how do you know that's a thing? It doesn't matter if you get the wine right if you can't tell me like what made you get to that conclusion. And so you have to back it up with the evidence. And then the same thing with those examples is like, hey, why does this person do this thing this way? Is super, super important. And if you don't think that way, it takes a while, and it's only through practice and honestly through the other students that you start to learn that. And I think I was in I didn't know what I was walking into really until February when we did the seminar in Seattle. And then I was like, that it's like, that's what you want.
So how is the program? I mean, like, I know this is like a big question, but has it been what you expected it to be? Has it been, because your podcast partner is in the program, so that's helpful. You get a little inside scoop, but I
know a lot of people in the program or who have become MWs. My previous WSET study group is done quite well. So I knew it was a self-study program, and it's really about the time and the commitment. It's like, and I have 2 kids. And so it's like, it's hard to make the time, and young kids at that, right? So, so it's hard to make that time and really block it out and just be consistent. And I think that the consistency with all things is like super, super important. I think, I think it is what I expected. I was hoping there was maybe a little bit more, like, I'd really like to see, I hear what's not good about papers or what's not good about things, but I'd like to see like, here's a good example of one. And like, you get snippets, you get like, this is a good introductory paragraph in some of the videos that are online, but I wish there was a little bit more of what good looks like. And so I think that's my biggest thing. And I've heard, like, we have the same mentor. So I probably haven't used her enough. I'm not sure how much you've used her.
Sorry, Claire, if you see this.
Because she's super open to helping. And I've heard other people have mentors that are like, don't care, or just don't have as much time for them. So I feel like that's on me. Like most things in this program, it's going to be on me. I think you're the only, I've got Annie and Dan coming up, and I think you're the only one that does have young kids. And so one of the questions that I got when I put up my, hey, what do I ask, is how do you balance your study time? Because you do have your outside of wine job, you do have your podcast. How are you managing this? Are you managing this? Yeah, it could always be better.
Sure.
It can always be better. So, obviously the kids are about getting them to school. Luckily, they're both in the same school, so like and that's just a recent development that they're both in the same school. So getting them to school and getting them out, like that's the hurdle. I tried to do things at night. But doing things doing things at night wasn't really working out for me because I'm just not in the right mental capacity to taste at night, or especially like late at night once they go to bed. So I've now shifted to be like, I'm waking up at 5:30 and I'm kind of like doing my morning routine before they get up. and so yeah, and so it's like, if I can get it's like, can I get a consistent hour and a half every day before they're going? And the weekend's a little easier because I can like block out with my spouse and be like, hey, I need some help. Or like this Sunday, I'm going up to Sonoma to go do a mock 12 wine flight. I'm like, hey, I'm gonna go do this thing. I'll be back by 1:32. Like, you
Yeah.
got them. And she's like, and she's super supportive. So like having a really helpful spouse. If you're a single parent, I don't know how you do this. I'll be honest.
Yeah, that would be tough. I totally hear you on the supportive spouse, and I'll give a shout out to my hubs who, I mean, my God, he pours blind for me, and just, I mean, it's like, it just, you do
No, my
need
wife
to.
doesn't do that.
Okay. And then he'll come in, he's like, these all look the same. Like, I know that's the problem.
Yeah.
So what would you say has that been the biggest challenge for you this year, is like finding a balance or finding study times? I'm not putting words in your mouth, but what has been, would you say, the
So
biggest challenge?
I think understanding the approach and like what works for you. And obviously there's a lot of, because of the pandemic, there's a lot of great information on MW sub, but unfortunately there's a lot of information. And so you can sift through it, but it's not all valuable. And for example, I watched a video on essay writing that I almost fell asleep during. And I almost didn't watch a second one, which actually was really, really helpful. And so it's like, you know, you having some idea of like, what do you actually need to do to figure out what is it going to help you to crack the nut of what these things are asking you. And I so here's the thing. It's like, the other takeaway is like, when we were in seminar and we did our blind tasting, it was stressful, but I walked out, I was like, that was fun. And I just hope to maintain that level of enthusiasm. No, I love getting schooled. So
Yeah.
you know, like, tasting those wines blind and missing a bunch and knowing what you need to work on. You just have to like take it. It's feedback, right? It's not their fault for choosing a tricky wine. It's your fault for not picking it up, and recognizing it. And so it's just like taking that feedback and like making it a positive. And so for me, I was just like, oh, well, that was fun. Like I did my last mock. I was like, you know, I did well, but not like, probably not pass level. But I was like, yeah, okay, I learned something here.
I think that's key, is like always picking up from your mistakes and being like, okay, why did I do that? And not, I don't know about you, man, but like sometimes your ego just needs to go out the window, and like you just need to take it, and you just need to. And I think that's a big wake up for a lot of, because obviously if we're in the MW program, we've got some smarts, but it's, you know, it knocks you down a bit.
Sure.
And I know they're not doing this deliberately. I hope they're not, but it's just, it's, you know, it's humbling, so to speak.
Yeah, I'm sure they're not knocking you down on but there's a whole swath of information that you have to learn. And it's really not. And the other thing is like, so there is an MW, Tim Wildman, who put together this kind of like,
talk about it.
Like this, like he did both a theory and a practical kind of like a breakdown of how do you approach it. And I think he was helpful for me because it was like, hey, he actually gave me, he's like, you don't need all these books. Like, so a lot of people start and they're like, it's about a knowledge assessment. And it's like, you have an hour to write an essay on a topic that you don't know going into it and provide examples. And like, once you want to write, you know, 900 to 1200 words. And if you break that down into like an intro, a conclusion paragraph, and then your examples, you only have about only about 30 words per paragraph of like knowledge that you need to drop. And I think that it's like, oh, well, you need to read 20 different books.
No.
And so you need a breadth of that. And then, but then you also be able to speak it as if you're talking to someone who actually knows what they're talking about. And so you don't have to like, you can use the jargon essentially to kind of craft your points. And so I think it's super important to like, how do you amass that knowledge set enough so that you can actually like have the jargon to speak to someone who's a viticulturist versus a winemaker versus someone who's in shipping, and be able to like converse with them at their level, that they don't have to slow down for you and give you like the dumb version, right? Like you can just talk to them. And I think that's the goal for all those things. But like having someone to help break that down. And then in terms of practical, like knowing what wines to taste is super important. Like they're gonna at some point give you a flight of wines and they're gonna say either 3 or 4 wines and say they're all the same grape. Like, right? Like at some point that's like a common question.
Sure.
Well, when they do that, there's only so many choices, right? So they're not going to give you 3 Barberas or, right, or something like, it's like,
oh, if they do on our exam.
right, but in general, they're not. Like, it's kind of going for center mass, right? It's like, if they're giving you 4 wines, it's only a handful of grapes. There's like 10 red grapes and 10 white grapes, and knowing how to pick those out and delineate those. If they give you 3 wines, it widens, obviously the funnel quite a bit. For example, in our practical, they gave us 3 Nebbiolos, which, a lot of times those grapes have very telltale signs.
As always. But that's not bad. And that's the thing, like you said earlier, it really is, it really is great to call those wines, but if you don't, but you're close and you still describe them and give a good analysis.
And the logic, yeah. It's like what you're thinking, yeah.
Exactly. So I don't know if Annie's on here. I know she was having problems jumping on. I want to ask you one question. Okay. On exam day, when you flip the paper over, what do you hope is the compulsory question? What do you hope the topic is?
Something about wine business.
Something about social media and the wine industry.
Yeah. Oh, any business topic, I think any paper 4, I'm super happy with. No, I think they're going to give broader questions, and so you can figure out how you want to plan of attack. I'm hoping it's not something like super like talk to me about like skin contact wines and the pros and cons of
I actually just did that one and STEM inclusion, but it's kind of a crapshoot, like yeah I don't know.
I'm worried about the theory, but I think the practicals where if looking at the number, looking at like talking to people, like it's the practical where people really get hung up. It's like, can you because it's not tasting notes, right? It has nothing to do with the tasting notes. The tasting note just helps you.
It's for you.
Up where you're going. It's for you, right? And so, it's really. And then there's actually so much of how is this wine made? Like, and sure, you and I could name a wine. We could rattle off how the wine's made, but how do you have evidence to back that up? Right?
And who's gonna drink it? Who are you gonna sell it to?
Exactly. Exactly. And then like how do you delineate quality levels, which I don't think is that complicated in the grand scheme of things, the quality level part, but it's like, but tying it all together in a very, I have 10 minutes per wine time is the hard part.
Hey.
Oh, can you hear me?
Yes. I don't know if you want to stay on, Robert. We're just, gonna.
Up to you. It's your show. Tell me what to do.
Well, I want to focus on Annie, but I really do thank you very much. And for people who are not listening to X Chateau podcast, do check them out. And you have a book out too, which I have not purchased, but it's got a lot of the information and a lot of the examples. So if you are in the program or thinking about it, get the book, listen to the podcast, follow Robert, and Robert, I will see you maybe next week, I think,
next weekend. Yeah.
We've been in a little study group together. So thank you. I appreciate your time, and happy studying.
Thank you.
Okay,
I gotta figure out how to exit here. Hold on one second.
You're the tech guy.
I got it.
Annie, it's great to see you and meet you.
It's great to see you too.
So I think I first saw you on one of our course days. Is that right? What the online
ones, yeah.
Yes.
Because that's been all online until seminar this year. So
yeah, and I want to get more information on that. So this is Annie, everybody. Annie, will you tell us just where are you located? What do you do in the wine industry, etc.?
Yes, I am located in New York City, and I have been working for 30 years with a background in wine that helps me with this exam absolutely zero.
Super.
I do wine appraisals and consultation with clients, and write, and I have a blog, and I do online media presentation and all of that stuff. So it's crazy. So one of the things I would say to people are interested in. Are you getting feedback? Should I try my?
It's a little glitchy. Yeah, but I don't. I can hear you. It's just glitchy.
I can't hear you.
Okay, and now I can't hear you. Oh.
Yeah.
It was working. Okay, we'll just go with it.
Sorry.
That's okay.
Computer.
Robert
Anyway,
says it's more of a connection.
so
He's the tech person. Yeah, go.
okay, all right. Well, I have my bar, but anyway, so I decided to join this program because, like, Hillary there, and I've been in it for years. Here for station. Let's see if I can. Maybe that'll.
Try the AirPods again. No. Okay.
No. Let me just get away. Let me get like right on top of the Wi-Fi.
Okay, that actually sounds quite clear.
Okay. Better.
Thank you. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so I did it last year. I got into the program, and I was in the program during the pandemic year, and that was tough.
Sure. Tell us about that. What everything was online. Is that right?
Yes, absolutely. Everything was online. And I don't want to fault the IMW. I'm not criticizing them, but I think they did their best.
Yeah.
But I think it's very telling that when I exited my stage 1 assessment last year, I felt very confident that I was going to go through to stage 2. Yeah. And then when I didn't, I was like, and now upon reflection, it's like there was, I was not adequately prepared for what was expected of me.
Okay.
The online seminars and feedback sessions were scattered and uneven with presenters, and I didn't get to know any of my fellow students, and it was just a lot of stuff that I thought was okay, and then it wasn't. So again, I'm not criticizing them, but my fear is that I've improved so much this year but I won't be able to communicate that to them. So.
Oh, well, I will tell you, when you and I were in the course day and you were reading out, and it was just for practical, and you were reading out your answers, I was like, geez Louise, this lady, like, like, I'm here, and you were like, they just sounded so much better structured and so much more thorough. So repeating this first year seems like not a bad thing. And I do think a lot of us join the program thinking like, oh my gosh, that's a horrible thing if we have to repeat. And I'm suspecting, a lot of people do, because it's a lot to,
they don't release the numbers, but no. I think more people repeat stage 1 than you think they do, first of all. People do get released from the program after stage 1. One of my study buddies did.
Okay.
So it's not just a touch point and smooth sailing, right? The fact is, I came into this thinking I'm probably not one of those geniuses who's going to get through in 3 years. So it doesn't faze me really that I'm repeating this year, because I would repeat maybe 1 or 2 years in stage 2.
Sure.
So it has given me more time to, like a lot of what Robert talked about, figure out, like I took Tim Wildman's classes. I took Jennifer Simonetti Bryan's classes. I spent the money on that in year 2 because they were helpful.
Okay.
So helpful.
Okay.
So it gave me more time to figure out how to argue better and do all that stuff. But yeah, it's just time. I mean, it's a marathon, not a sprint, for sure.
Yeah.
I frequently use Everest as a metaphor, saying like, if you put one foot in front of the other, eventually you should get there, but it's going to take a long time, and it's going to push you to the brink, and you're going to get stronger at it and better at it, but it's also going to tire you out.
And sometimes you need to just stop and rest. Like, it's not just like a continual uphill. Well, it is a continual uphill battle, but sometimes you just need to take a break. Yeah. So you took those 2 courses. Thanks for mentioning those, because I do think that it's important for people to know that there is extra help if needed. Yeah.
I think the first year in the program is learning how to do the program.
Yeah, I kind of feel like it took several months, and now I'm like, oh, like Robert mentioned at the seminar, it's like, oh, this is what we should be doing. Yeah. And by then you only have a few months left before the exam. Exactly. So yeah. So you sat the exam. Do you have any tips for those of us who are sitting? And I know yours was different because it was all, did you all have to type it then? Nobody could write it.
Yeah, it was, well,
is that right?
No, I think you could have written it and then like faxed it to them or something, or taken a picture and sent it.
Fax.
I think they had like a grace period of like 15 minutes where you could like upload what you hand wrote.
Okay.
But I didn't do that. It was, I will say again, it was weird. Like until I walked into seminar, 5 minutes seminar, and I went, oh, this is what it's supposed to be like. I had no idea.
Okay.
So sitting that exam was also like, I mean, I'm going to write about soil. I think our mandatory question was on soil. And I was like, I want to write about that. And I finished it. I finished the tasting. I knew I made some mistakes, but it was weird being in my house in a room by myself. It didn't really feel like an exam.
It felt like the entrance exam, probably.
Yeah.
Like, yeah. And
just
I do think there's something about being in the room and you feel like, okay, I've got to turn it on right now because I'm in an exam.
Yeah.
Did you get any feedback as to what you could improve on? So for those of us who are going to maybe be asked to repeat this first stage, do we learn from our exam?
Yes, you get very little.
Oh, okay.
You get like 3 sentences. And I wished for more, but they don't release the grades, so you don't know how close you were to getting through it or getting out.
Okay.
But you know, one of the things, for example, that they said is this I had to work on quality because I got Pinot Noir for the grapes, but I thought the Chilean Pinot Noir was the Burgundy Premier Cru. It was really good.
Okay. Let us know what it was.
Right. But that's been something I've been working on this year, is really figuring out how to pinpoint quality in the glass, how to talk about it better. And I've become a better taster because of it. Absolutely.
Good. Are you in a tasting group?
Yes. I'm in a in-person tasting group in New York.
Okay.
There's a couple stage 2 students we've roped in as well. And we tend to meet once a week and do anywhere from a 3, 4, 6 flight from a past exam.
Okay.
And then we talk about it afterwards. So we do it blind under timed conditions, and then we talk about it. Not just like, did you get it right, but like, how did you argue it? What did you mistake it for? Why?
Yeah.
And then I have started for the past couple of months doing some open deep dives with one of my study buddies. So we'll bang through like 10 or 12 wines on a Sunday and just take notes and figure out our markers and try to pinpoint regional differences and all that jazz. And then I'm in an online theory group. And then another small group started like a week ago just to kind of prepare for the exam.
Okay. Yeah. But you know what? I think it's important. And you were lacking that last year. I mean, maybe you did online study groups, but like it's important to have that support network of other students. So you know you're not doing this alone. It can be really isolating, and to not know that other people, oh, you're struggling too. Okay, good. It's not just me. I mean, that's it's
invaluable because again, last year I was in person with my study group for like when we found each other finally, but we were the blind leading the blind.
Yeah.
We didn't know that our approach wasn't maybe the best.
Yeah.
So now, like I keep saying with seminar, when you can meet other students and see how they interpret things and talk to MWs and see them as people, not just someone on a screen.
Yeah.
It's exponentially valuable. I don't know how anyone passed last year. I really don't.
Well, I know they don't release numbers, but I know there's a lot that are repeating. Yeah. Because I think, and let's be honest, trying to study in a pandemic, you've always got that in the back of your mind that, oh, we're in the middle of a pandemic. So it's hard to focus, period. Full stop. Yeah. Robert had a question. When you did get your feedback, did you get any comments on, okay, here's what you did on practical and here's what you did on theory? Or was it just, here's a few things to work on overall?
Yeah, it was very generalized. And that's unfortunate, I think, because when you do the assignments, the theory and practical assignments throughout the year, they give you a few, for those who don't know.
Yeah.
And you get feedback from MWs. And some of them are very detailed and helpful. But those aren't always the people marking the exam.
Yeah.
So it would have been better to have the examiners give a little more feedback.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I guess they can't do that for hundreds and hundreds of people. So
they have a life too.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I know what you mean, because some of my TAMs, so yeah, for those of you who don't know, you do get to submit, I think it's 6 total, 3 for theory, 3 for practical, and you do get feedback. And my study group and I have compared notes, and some of us have gotten really helpful, thorough feedback. And then sometimes it's like a couple of sentences. So it really does depend on who your marker is. And like I was chatting with Robert, a lot of it is, you know, some very constructive criticism, and you need to develop your thick skin and realize, like, this is, you know, what you think might be just a super duper essay maybe isn't quite what they're looking for. So learn from what they're saying and don't take it personally, which can be tough. Let's be honest.
Oh, my first TAMs last year, it was way below threshold, and the best thing that the person said was, not a total disaster.
Oh, wonderful, Annie.
And I was like, oh my God. But what I learned was that, you know, I'm a blogger. I write journalistically, as they say. I was not writing appropriately for an essay exam.
Okay.
And you're about to talk to Dan, and I'm envious because a lot of the UK students grew up in that educational format that we in the States or South America, or, you know, one of my study buddies is Armenian, might not have had that. So we're having an extra learning curve of figuring out how to do it right, you know?
Yeah.
So that took me a long time to learn that. And of course, I committed one of the cardinal sins because I didn't actually answer the question.
Oh, so you weren't the emoji person. You didn't.
No emoji.
I read that in one of the examiner's reports, and I love my emojis, but I'm like, wow, I can't imagine actually putting an emoji in an essay.
That's I don't even think I would have done that. But
exclamation points, maybe. I have to rein myself in with the exclamation points. But yeah, and that's been a common, because I've gone back over the examiner's reports, which are incredibly helpful for future students. Definitely read those. But a common comment is, don't write journalistically. This is an academic paper. And so I do think it's hard for those of us who write a bit more casually to do that. So
100%. It's a journey. I mean, listen, my biggest advice to anyone watching who's considering it at all is do it. Just do it. Because the 2 things you have to do. You have to sit down with yourself and say, okay, if I'm not successful, how am I going to handle that mentally? Because anyone who wants to do this is competitive.
Sure.
So you have to realize that the success rate is not high. So there's likelihood that you will not be successful. So sit down and like have that conversation with yourself. And I did. And I said, you know what, even if I'm in this program 2 years or 20 years, because I keep failing out of it or whatever, it's worth it. It's so hard, but I wouldn't trade it. Even now, when I'm so stressed right before the next exam, I wouldn't trade it. It's so exciting. And you learn so much about yourself too.
You do. And I think that's awesome advice, Annie. Thank you. Because I think if you reach a point where it's like, okay, I may not pass. You know, a lot of us have probably not failed at much or anything in our lives. And I prefer saying not pass as opposed to fail.
Right.
And this might be it. And that's okay. Like, just enjoy. I know enjoy the journey is a cliche, but really do. And I mean, we're meeting some amazing people. I love that you took the time to do this. Thank you so much.
Oh, of course. Well, thank you for asking me. But I mean, I want to give a shout out to all my buddies all over the globe. When you go through this program, it's not just like a work colleague. You're meeting people who are in the trenches. It bonds you. It does. I have such love and compassion for all of my study buddies and all over the globe and all the people in the program. It's just, you know, it's awesome.
It is. We're all doing this. Okay, so I'm going to bring, Dan, if you're out there, let me know.
Yeah.
So let me ask the same question I asked Robert. You flip the paper over. What is your hopeful compulsory question?
I do. Like, I think he said he didn't want the skin contact one. And I was like, I'll take skin contact. I like that. My hope is that it is a question that is broad enough. That's really all.
Hey.
Yeah.
That is something that doesn't make me panic and go, I don't know that. That at least makes me say I can apply my critical analysis to this.
Yeah.
I can bring in the examples I remember. So honestly, I just don't want something too technical and specific.
Yeah.
Dan probably wants something technical and specific about winemaking.
No, I don't. I don't want technical and specific. I'm more like Robert. P4 is my strong point.
It seems like
Sure.
it. Yeah. It
Yeah.
seems like it.
Social media, business, marketing. I could do that all day.
Yeah.
I think it's
Well, it
very
might be-
unlikely that the P4 stuff will be the compulsory question, though.
Right. I agree.
You
I
never
don't think
know.
I've seen one.
Yeah.
Has it
It's not worth trying to game the system because you never know what they're going to pick.
You know,
No.
that's true.
You don't know.
That's true. So,
All right.
Dan, thank you so much. Okay, Annie, thank you so much.
I'll
for
let you
joining
go
us.
if I can figure it out. And good to see you, Dan. I'll watch the rest. And thank you so much for having me.
Yeah,
Awesome.
thanks for tips and tricks. Thanks, Annie. Dan, it's awesome to meet you because to be honest with you, I just am fascinated by you on Twitter.
Thanks. I'll take that as a compliment. I'll take it. I'll take the
Do.
compliment.
Annie's
Annie's
like,
still here,
Annie
hey.
cannot leave.
I
She
can't
can't
leave.
She doesn't want to go.
How do I leave?
I don't know. I don't know.
Well, I'll just.
Yeah. I don't know.
Magic.
Just hang out. So would you please introduce yourself for those who don't know you? What do you do in the wine industry? Who are you?
What do? I do a little bit of everything in the wine industry. So I do freelance tastings. I work for a very small winery here in sort of East Anglia in the UK, about 2 hours north of London. If that gives any reference to anyone that doesn't live in the UK, you have to reference whereabouts near London you are.
Yes.
So yeah, a tiny little winery. I work for those a few days a week in the cellar door. Hopefully they're going to let me play around in the winery this year. I do all sorts of stuff, tastings, but sort of most of the things I do are focused around independent merchants and small wineries.
Okay.
So that's where I'm at, yeah. But I spent a long time working as a buyer, working for an auction house, working in marketing. So I've done a little bit of everything over maybe the last 15 years in the wine world.
Okay. So you're broad. You've got a good base. Unlike Annie, who said none of her past experience has helped.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The only thing I
knows?
haven't done in the wine world is
Yeah.
actually make wine.
Okay.
I've done everything else.
I know. There's a lot of us though that have not.
Yeah.
Made
Making wine is hard. That's the difficult
No
bit.
kidding.
Right? I
No
can
kidding.
talk about
It's a
it.
lot of
I can tell
science
customers
stuff.
about it. It's
Yeah.
just chemistry, right?
Yeah, exactly. Microbial spoilage, blah, blah, blah. You know we're getting a P2 compulsory.
Of course.
So tell us a little bit about your Substack, if you wouldn't mind, because that's how I found you is Twitter a year and a half ago. And I'm fascinated by your voice in the wine world because it is very approachable. You tell it like it is, which I really respect. There's not a lot of bullshit. Not even a little bit.
Yeah.
There's tell us about
there's a fine line
your
between bullshit
newsletter.
and arrogance. I
Yeah.
think with me sometimes. So basically, I had that thing where, you know, on social media, people are talking about, oh, I've just joined the Master of Wine program, and everyone posts that purple square on their Instagram account to say, hey, look at me, I just got accepted on the MW program. Mm-hmm. And if you look at that, a lot of people who do that, make that step, have some level of privilege within the industry, whether it's personal wealth, whether it's a company that can fund them through it, whether it's a connection to someone who's already an MW, there's usually something that helps them on that journey. Yep. And for me, I was looking at that thinking, actually, you know, the biggest barrier here is not the fact that I think I could probably have a bash. Like one of the big barriers of the MW is the cost. It's pretty simple. And I think there are a hell of a lot of really amazing people in the wine industry who, for whatever reason, don't necessarily have that funds to get on the course. And, you know, there are bursaries that you can apply for. There's loads, but there's, you know, at any one point, there might be 400 people studying for the MW and there's less than 5 or 6 bursaries a year. And so one of the things I started talking about was this cost. And a couple of people on my Twitter account said, hey, Dan, why don't you get your 1,000 odd Twitter followers to chip in a tenner and that will cover your cost. And I was like, yeah, very funny. That's great. Yeah. But over here we have the Wine and Spirits Trade Association, which is like our sort of government lobby group. And the CEO of the Wine and Spirits Trade Association, a guy called Miles, he said, look, Dan, if you actually do this, I will be the first person to chip in 100 quid. And so he's in our like trade magazines over here. He's one of the most influential people in the UK wine trade.
That's
and he sent me a message on Twitter and said, I follow you on Twitter. You've got a cool voice. I like how approachable you are. I'll chip in 100 quid if you start it. And so I started a crowdfunder in October 2020, sort of halfway through COVID. And by the sort of May that year, so 8 months in, I'd raised enough dosh for the first stage.
Very cool.
Which is super cool, right?
It is.
And so following on from that, maybe slightly presumptuously, this summer, I started a newsletter Substack subscription. Basically, anyone who chipped in had been receiving emails from me relatively regularly for about maybe 6 or 8 months, basically since I started the original crowdfunder. And then off the back this year, I decided to sort of take that public, put it on Substack, and then let anybody who wanted to read what I was writing. And if they enjoyed what I was doing, if they enjoyed the process, if they enjoyed following along, if they wanted to support me sort of super personally, then they could, if they wanted to, sort of pay a little bit of money every month or pay for the year to do that. And so at the moment, like the Substack is sort of partially funding next year, just sort of ticking over. And so I've used some of that crowdfunding to like pay for samples, pay for travel, pay for you know, hotels, accommodation, on top of paying for the course fees, which is amazing. And I'm eternally grateful to every single person that's paid any attention to me over the last year. But the sort of the negative connotations of that is I can't walk into a room in the wine industry without somebody going, hey, Dan, how's the MW going? Because everybody knows I'm doing it. So it's impossible to do it silently. Like when I was 17, my driving instructor said, don't tell anyone you're taking the test. And then when you take it and pass, that's when you tell everyone you've done it. Yeah, makes a lot of sense. And so I told everyone I was doing the MW before I'd even started it. You know, as part of my crowdfunder, I hadn't even applied when I started the crowdfunding. Insane. But here we are. We're just sort of 2 weeks away from the stage 1 assessment. And I'm feeling pretty fucking chill, to be honest.
Are you?
Yeah.
Good. That's a good.
Maybe that's just sort of blind, you know, whatever. But
so
we'll just see how it goes.
I feel like you have been kind of steady Eddie this past year with your studies, or at least that's what I'm reading in your newsletter and your Twitter, is that you've just kind of gradually studied a little bit every week. Yeah.
So right from the start, my MW mentor was Sarah Abbott. And before I applied, Sarah said to me, have you got any kids? Have you got any other commitments? Like, what's going to detract you from doing this? And I was like, basically nothing. And so she said, if you can do 12 hours a week, every week, you'll be fine. So it's not a case of doing 25 hours a week and dropping down to working 2 days a week. But it's also not a case of trying to cram 8 hours on a Sunday and then doing like a bit here and there. So I try and do like 2 hours, maybe 2 or 3 days a week, and then 4 hours, 5 hours over the weekend. So like little and often, and that can be a 2-hour car journey listening to a whole load of podcasts. It can be, you know, a webinar for an hour and a half. It can be some blind tasting. Like that 12 hours isn't sat in front of my laptop studying. That 12 hours is sort of active engagement. And so what I'll quite often do is listen to a podcast, but take notes as I'm going. So I end up with a Word document of all the bullet points and the interesting points of that podcast, rather than just listening to it and thinking, okay, I've got that.
Or I listen to it when I'm driving and then I'm like, oh crap, I want to remember that, and it's out of the brain.
One of the other things that I've been doing quite a lot is putting together, like, one of the things about doing the theory part of the MW is talking about examples and being able to reference the why. And I think Robert mentioned the same thing. You know, the jump from diploma to MW is like, okay, this is what they do, and MWs, this is why they do it. And podcasts are an unbelievable resource for that those sort of anecdotal conversations with winemakers across hundreds of different podcasts. There's so many now. But the problem with example gathering is that you can try and gather up one example from one winery for every single tiny, minute topic you can ever imagine. Whereas the best way of doing that is learn about as few wineries as possible, but learn them ludicrously in depth.
Yeah.
So understand their business structure, their commercial structure, their ownership, their marketing, their social media, their rootstocks, their grape varieties, their principal markets around the world, their winemaking techniques, their vessels, their yeast. Like, understand all of that about maybe 15 wineries, maybe 20. Yeah.
Yeah. But I heard that because
Yeah.
it's so much easier than you understand holistically. And I started just getting like, you know, random examples. And now I'm like, no, who did that? Who, you know, it's,
and you'd be like, oh, yeast. I can't remember who does yeast.
No.
But if you get a question on yeast and you're like, okay, this winery I know really well does this. This winery I know really well does this. Like, and I think sort of Tim Wildman touches on that a bit, and a few other people have sort of said the same thing, that you need like a big winery, a small winery, an organic winery, a conventional winery, one from the old world, one from the new world, red wine, white wine, sparkling. Just like get your matrix of wineries together. And so that's probably one of the things that I did pretty early on.
Yeah.
Started thinking to myself, learn less wineries better.
I think that's really wise.
Yeah.
I did not start doing that until too late.
And I think the other thing that I started on, so the study program is you get accepted on in end of September, October. And then for most students, you don't go to your first in-person stuff until January. Yeah. And for us this year, we didn't go to our first in-person things. I was in Austria until March. So you've got October, November, December. You've got like 6 months between getting on the course and actually having any contact time with any tutors. I spent that 6 months working on essay structure. Like how many words to put into my intro, how many words to put into my outro, what points do I need to cover in my intro, how many paragraphs do I need to write.
How did you get that information? What did you like? How did you? Is it just because you are like Annie mentioned? I think growing up in Britain and having that as part of your academic. Did you use any of the MW stuff for those?
I studied electronic engineering at college, which was very hands-on, very practical. You know, I built like guitar amps and guitar pedals and stuff from scratch out of wood and solder. Like, so I didn't go through an academic institution as part of my education. I haven't written formal academic essays, never done that. But it's relatively intuitive. So if you look at essay structures, we've got a study group at the moment that are talking about different essay types. And you get asked a question and then you're like, okay, what structure shall I put this into? Is it the 5 Ps? Is it SWOT analysis? Is it who, what, where, when, how? And like, not every question lends itself to a structure. But being able to quickly find your narrative within a question is one of the best bits of advice I can give to anyone. So last night we were prepping answers on social media, and my narrative was about brands as a social influencer, brands working with a social influencer, and social influence having impact on brands. Right? So it doesn't fit into any of the sort of traditional essay structures that you would maybe learn through an academic institution. But when you're coming to write an essay, finding your narrative and finding your voice off the back of a one sentence question and thinking, okay, I've got my journalistic blogger angle on this, but I'm going to write it pretty dry and pretty analytically. And I'm going to use my examples to underpin my knowledge. But you've got a narrative thread through that essay. And so sort of working on that from day one has really helped. So being able to bang out 2 1,000-word essays in an hour, or 2 essays in 2 hours, I've been pretty comfortable with since day one.
That's impressive.
And that's like, if you can write, you can pass the MW. That's the big thing to learn.
If you get the right question.
I'm sort of ludicrously convinced of that. If you can if you can learn dry notes, right? Here's a really interesting point. So dry notes are where you don't taste any wine, but you look at a question and you try and answer it based on what the wines are, what you know the wines to taste like.
Yeah.
And so if you get Marlborough Sauvignon Blanc or Pinot Sherry, you can write that answer in your sleep. Yeah. See a Pinot Sherry, and you're like, oh, okay, this is pale lemon color and it's high alcohol fortified. So 99% of the time that's going to be Pinot Sherry. Is it dry? Yes. Bam. Pinot Sherry. And you write the answer in 2 minutes, right?
Yeah.
Why can't you do that for every other grape variety?
Yeah.
Like Marlborough Sauvignon Blanc, Pinot Sherry, easy. Okay, let's learn the same thing for Chilean Carmenere. And if you taste it and you're like, okay, I think this is Chilean Carmenere. It's quite leafy, it's quite herbaceous, but it's high alcohol. Right, bang. And sort of understand how you're going to write the answer before you've even tasted any of the wines in front of you. That's what I've been working on for the last sort of month, really. Is that process of like dry noting everything and making like Cote Rôtie and Cornas as easy as Pinot Sherry.
Yeah.
Because some of those complicated wines, you're like, oh, where do I start? How do I, what's the winemaking here? What's the taste? And you don't know how to structure the essay. Yeah. If that I sort of come back to Pinot Sherry all the time. Like, can I write this tasting note as easily as I can for a Pinot Sherry?
Oh, I hate Pinot Sherry.
If we get Pinot Sherry, we're in. Pinot Sherry and Marlborough Sauvignon Blanc, thank you very much.
You know, they pay so much attention to blind tasting and practicing that, which is important to some extent. But yeah, I have a big bucket of different wines and I just draw one out every day and I'm like, okay, how would I describe this?
Yep. So I have
why is it not that? Like, you know, we need to be able to say, well, why is it Chilean Carmenere and not Malbec or stuff like that? So I think that's
wise. I have
wise.
Like a sort of a benchmark Coravan library at home. So like Chilean Carmenere versus Cabernet Franc versus Malbec versus, you know, and then taste them side by side as laterals. Yeah. I get my wife to pour them blind for me. So Millie will pour 3 of them and not tell me which one's which. But I know that there's a Carmenere, a Malbec and a Cab Franc. It's like, okay, which one's which? Yeah. And the more of that you can do, the better you'll get. So blind tasting is great because it sort of gets you in the game to looking at structure without second guessing the answer because you know it. But being able to deduce what's what from the glass is quite helpful.
I agree. And I think a lot of people who maybe don't, you know, have a study group close by worry that they're going to be, you know, behind because they aren't able to blind taste. But yes, I call them dry drills. And they're a huge advantage, I think to be practicing that.
Dry tasting and then open tasting, but with sort of laterals.
Yeah, like your
you know, Chenin, Gruner and Riesling, just to get your head in the game of what tastes what. So I do that quite a bit at home. And so like I work at the vineyard every single Saturday in the cellar door, talking to customers, tasting wines, which means like my sort of main study group that I talk to quite regularly, they meet up every Saturday and taste loads of wine. And so I'm like, I can't do any Saturdays ever. Let me know when you're doing something that's not on a Saturday. Maybe, and like my guys at the vineyard, they're super keen to support me. Like they want to see me do well. So they're like, if you need a Saturday off here and there, like do it for like useful weeks. So like last weekend, we spent Saturday and Sunday doing loads of stuff. And like, I was like, I have to go to this. Like this is a really useful 2 days.
I saw that boot camp looked really helpful.
Yeah, it was super good. And we had an MW in the UK called Will Lowe. He runs Cambridge Distillery, does some stuff for Pall Mall TV, and he came and just threw loads of amazing tips and loads of amazing bits of advice at us. Quite some of them quite sort of philosophical. Like he repeated the obstacle is the path so many times. By the end of it, we didn't understand what he was trying to explain. But you know, like once you get the idea of sort of being disciplined and being sort of logical about your approach. But I mean, in life in general, I deal with stress very well. Like I'm a very relaxed, very analytical, sort of thought-driven, and I sort of understand that about myself. But it means I don't fret ever. I just put steps in place to make sure I know what's going to go on. One of the things Will said to us last weekend, and it's something that I already did anyway, but the way he described it was great. He said, like, when you go into the exam, you have your desk and your laptop and your glasses. He was like, that's your cockpit, as if you're a pilot. And like, you want everything to be in the exact same place every single time.
Yeah.
So you know where the glasses go, you know how you're going to number them. You've got the right pen, you've got the right spittoon. Like, and he said one of the things he did was go and sit in other people's seats on like course days, like at lunchtime, and like go and sit in someone else's seat, and then their setup would feel really weird and awkward. And so he knew that what he had in front of him was correct.
Interesting.
And like one other tip that is amazing is take 13 glasses into the practical exam with you in case you drop or break one.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like the marginal gains, like the little things will help you through.
Important.
Yeah.
That's important. And I think you had written like that you're putting numbers on your glasses.
Oh yeah, I got told off for that at the Institute of Master Wine, like the IMW offices in London, where we had a couple of study days. I have like a Sharpie, like proper Sharpie, and I write on the glasses, and like that doesn't come off. Like a glass marker, it just doesn't come off. You have to like really scrape it off. And so I just bowled into the study days like I do at home, just numbered all the glasses with my thick black pen. Like there's no way I'm getting these glasses modelled up. There's no way I'm messing around with notepads or little sticky notes.
Because that could totally happen. You kind of, totally.
Really, you could happily pick up 2 glasses, put one down, have another sniff.
Yeah. Oh, that's
and
the worst.
before you know it, you've got 12 wines in a different order from when they started. But if they're numbered on the glass, and like sticky notes can fall off, and like water-based chalk stuff can just rub off in the heat. Get a pen and write, like deal with the consequences of having to scrub the glasses later.
Yeah.
You don't want to deal with that while you're sitting the exam.
Yeah. No, that was good advice. I was like, I should do that because I haven't. But you know, when you're anxious in an exam, you could very easily
like remove all potential routes to anxiety.
Totally.
So like one of the things that I've been practicing is practicing handwriting my exams, as well as practicing typing them, and figuring out which one I'm better at, or figuring out like I'm gonna handwrite the practical but type the theory. But I want to know that if my laptop breaks, I can I can handwrite the theory too. But I know that I'm way quicker at practical exams. I don't waffle so much. I'm more succinct. I don't overthink what I'm about to write if I do it by hand. Whereas when I'm writing an essay, 1,000 words in an hour, I can type that much more quickly.
Yeah.
Like, so approaching each exam with the best method makes a lot of sense too.
I think that's super smart. And I've heard that sometimes Surpass maybe doesn't work. So people who had planned to type
have an exam for that. Have a tech plan for this too.
Do you? Because I'm nervous about that. I have not practiced handwriting.
So practice handwriting 1, but also 2. Like when you're using Surpass, which is the sort of online system we use for typing the exams, is basically to mimic that at home. Is to use like Notepad, like the absolute worst text editor you can find. Like if you're on Microsoft, like I am, or if you're on Apple, just like literally use the most basic Notepad possible with no formatting, no bold, no italic, no spell check, nothing. Literally just WordPad. And so it doesn't check your spelling as you go. You can't see the errors because they've not got the little red squiggly line. You can't. Like even get one that can't even copy and paste, so you have to learn how to do things the old clunky way. Because when you're in Surpass and you've got to write an essay and there's no spell check, there's no formatting, there's no red squiggly lines, like you need to have got used to that.
That's
and so
really
I do all of my essay practice at home on my laptop in Notepad, and then copy and paste it into a Google Doc when I'm done to check the spelling.
No, I think that's great advice.
It's much easier to do that than it is to try and use Google Docs or Word or Pages or whatever you're using, and like try and turn everything off so that it doesn't correct it. Just use one that doesn't have them to start with, and then copy and paste it in when you finish.
Yeah, because we're so used to like our Word document just automatically correcting our misspellings.
Like
and when you're
everyone,
typing fast, you're gonna make errors.
everyone I know said like, oh, just turn off all of your spell checker, turn off all of your autocorrect. But like if you're using Google Docs, it's really hard to turn off autocorrect because it will still underline it. If you're using Word, it's still, it makes you notice the mistakes because it's wiggly. But in Surface, you don't have that.
Yeah.
So like, yeah, just using a really shit Word editor on your laptop and get used to it, like in almost like the worst font imaginable too. Like don't
It
use
is
like
bad
Arial.
font.
Yeah, like you like try and mimic the situation.
Yeah.
That's what I do a lot.
Oh, so I'm glad you're feeling good. You've got some good advice, and I really do appreciate you saying how you've studied, because I think some people hear that they can't have a life or that they've got to study, 30 hours a week, and maybe some people do that. Maybe that's what they are doing. But it's not realistic for most of us to dedicate that much time. So I appreciate you being honest about how much you're studying. I would also
say that the stage 1 is part of the process. And if you don't pass it first time, have another go. Like the stage 1 assessment isn't the end point. No one sits or takes the MW with the goal of passing the stage 1. Like you've got to do stage 2 and the research papers. So it's just a sort of another step on the process. And if you don't hit it first time, like you don't hit it first time and you carry on. And like stick with your study group and still turn up to the tastings and just carry on. Like there's an episode of Seinfeld. I've basically been watching Seinfeld from the start as my way of switching off. Like I literally watched it from the very start, 9 series. And that's a couple of episodes of Seinfeld every day to sort of switch my brain off. And there's an episode where George quits his job and then decides he doesn't want to quit his job. And so he just goes back into work the next day as if he hadn't quit. And that's how to approach the stage 1. Like have a bash. If you don't get it right, just carry on as if you haven't, and then have another go next year.
And honestly, on that note, I think that we would be in a better, that's how I'm going into this, is like, I would be in a better position next year if I do repeat stage 1, because now I have a better understanding of what's expected and how I want to study. A year ago, I was fumbling around. What do I do?
Nobody who has ever passed or won the Bollinger Prize, nobody who's ever won the Bollinger Prize for tasting has passed stage 1 first time.
Really? Interesting factoid.
That's a fact.
Okay.
So that will prep you. Yeah.
That's helpful.
Yeah.
That's helpful.
The Bollinger Prize is like the pinnacle of being MW. It's like the best, like nobody who's ever won it passed stage 1 first time.
That's impressive.
Or passed. Yeah, that's what I have. Hasn't passed first time.
Before I let you go, because thank you so much for doing this.
Yeah.
What do you hope? You flip your paper over. What do you hope our compulsory question is on? What is it?
The compulsory question. What do I hope the compulsory question
What would you love? You'd be like, yes.
I honestly, as long as I can pull together enough paragraphs to create an essay for whatever that question is, I'll be happy.
Good for you.
It doesn't matter what it is. I mean, I would say anything paper 4, but it's not going to be that. So we're away.
Maybe. No, okay.
But I mean, what I will probably do is there's 3 questions in the stage 1 theory. And I would probably do an essay plan in 8 or 9 minutes for all 3. And then figure out which of the 2 optional ones I'm going to do.
Yeah. Good.
Because it's worth, if I see a paper 4 question and I'm like, okay, cool, of course I'm going to do paper 4.
Right.
And then you've got another question that is on like yeast strains, and you're like, actually at the winery and on my podcast I've been listening to a lot about yeast strains. Like just take an extra 5 minutes to prep that one as well.
Yeah.
And to see if I can put together enough examples in a like plan and think actually that one might be better for me.
I think that's a good approach.
Prep all 3 is the plan.
No, that's a good approach. And I think I'm going to tackle the one I'm most confident about first, so I can kind of get my groove. And then
the other thing I do is prep all, like plan all three first, like spend the first half an hour planning, and then you've got an hour and a half to write the essays.
Yeah.
Rather than planning one, write the essay, overrun a bit, panic about which one you're going to do, then you've only got 20 minutes to write the essay. Like spend half an hour planning both of them, and then just go back and then write them based on your plan.
Mm-hmm.
Sort of time management technique.
You sound like you're in such a good spot.
Yeah,
you really do. I love talking to you because you just have a really nice, calming, confident, but not cocky attitude. I love it. We need more future MWs like you.
Well, we've got to pass first.
I know, but you've got a lot of people in your corner, so including
I've
myself.
also got a lot of people that are paid to be in my corner.
Pay to play.
Yeah.
So thank you for coming, for joining, and for anybody who has questions, I'm going to tag all of my 3 guests and reach out to them. I'm sure they're happy to answer anything.
Oh, yeah.
We at Elevage are happy to answer anything. And maybe we'll do this a couple times a year, you know, depending on any feedback we get. But Dan, I really appreciate it. And good luck if I don't see you before the 25th. But yeah, cheers to everybody. And good luck all the other stage 1 students and stage 2. We hope to join you someday.
Yeah.
Okay.
Bye.
Thanks. Bye.